Anyway, give me 1 second, chat. I was told that we needed to listen to this PSA real quick. Be right back. This has just started running in New York. I don't know what it is.
So there's been a nuclear attack. Don't ask me how or why, just know that the big one has hit, okay? So what do? There are 3 important steps that I want you to remember. Step 1, get inside fast. You, your friends, your family, get inside. And no, staying in the car is not an option. You need to get into a building and move away from the windows. Step 2. Stay inside. Shut all doors and windows. Have a basement? Head there. If you don't have one, get as far into the middle of the building as possible. If you were outside after the blast, get clean immediately. Remove and bag all outer clothing to keep radioactive dust or ash away from your body. Step 3. Stay tuned. Follow media for more information. Don't forget to sign up for Notify NYC for official alerts and updates. And don't go outside until officials say it's safe. All right? You've got this.
I don't know why I had to run that. I don't know why, but I guess, you know, I don't know. Suddenly they just started running like what happens if the nuke hits PSA. I don't know. Duck and cover. Somehow the left has caused us to be attacked by a nuclear bomb. Speaking of K-Hive earlier, here's a liberal accused of sexual assault primarying Cori Bush. I'm not too worried, man.
I'm Steve Roberts, and I'm running for Congress against Cori Bush. Our country is spinning out of control. High gas prices, Roe, and children murdered in their schools. Now is the time to stand with President Biden, and I'll have his back, both in service and in Congress. I won't vote against the president just because I don't get everything I want. And together, we'll pass common sense gun laws and work to reform the police, not to fund them. I'm Steve Roberts, and I approve this message. I'm Steve Roberts, and
I wonder if Nancy Pelosi is going to come into St. Louis and campaign for Cori. What do you think? All right, let's get into politics.
Happy Independence Day, America. Freedom is brought to you by a bunch of guys with guns. We're celebrating freedom from England and Delta Dental. Happy Independence.
What is this short? Is that the Trump standing on a tank shirt? Holy shit. I honestly don't know if it's satire or not. I don't know. I don't know if it's satire or not. I honestly, I can't tell. Inflation rose 9.1% in June. 9.1%. Holy shit.
Yeah, so, and I think the reason is because when I look at this report, I don't see any relief anywhere. Even before we got to this 9.1%, there had been some sectors that were behaving a little bit better. I look at rents going up. I didn't see any relief in apparel. There was some hope, folks, that maybe with the inventory that Courtney Reagan's been talking about at some of the department stores, that you might see some relief in apparel. Not much there. I did see airline fares go down 1.8%. I don't even know what that means. I'm sure it's not going to hang on there. I guess the only question is you had double-digit 11%, 12% increases in energy. As to whether or not some of that comes off the boil in the future, given what's happened in gasoline futures markets, that they've come down by nearly $1, at least from the peak, whether or not and how that shows up and when that shows up in the consumer price is really a question. But overall, you have this unrelenting increase in prices from varying degrees, from 0.7 on rent up to 1% on food. And there's every reason to think this would make the Fed tougher right here, Andrew.
Steve, thank you for that. I want to get over to Mike Santoli, who's watching the stock market as well. What's your take here, Mike?
Yeah, pretty linear in terms of all the things Rick and Steve were talking about and how that feeds into equity prices. There's an impatience inherent in the equity market to try to look for the turn, to look for this sequence of better numbers that's going to allow us to believe both peak inflation is in place and then that the Fed can therefore possibly ease back. And so what do we need for that? Well, the Fed has told you it needs a sequence of month-on-month declines in core inflation at least. You have to kind of restart the clock when you get a hot number like this, and that's where we are at this point, essentially not being able to price in that relief. The bond market volatility has been searing recently. I mean, if you look at any indication of it, as well as currency market volatility. Equity market volatility has been actually more muted, but it really can't fully calm down. The stock market can't really fully get away from the macro pressures and maybe focus on whether earnings are priced in or not until you do see those other kind of fixed income and currency markets maybe settle down a little bit. We'll say, you know, we kind of went down almost 1% yesterday afternoon on almost nothing. We got a big options expiration. I think there's a chance you can clear some of this macro preoccupation away for the short term once we get into earnings season. But unfortunately, it's kind of a more of the same story, same treadmill that equity investors are walking on.
Hey, Rick and Steve, I want you guys just to weigh in on your respective opinions about the relative importance of I came up with 5 things in terms of that we can blame the inflation on. Okay, we got the Putin price hike. We got that. We got the reopening from the pandemic and the supply chain issues. We got the Fed flooding the world, or central bankers flooding the world with money for years and years and years. And then you've got fiscal spending, which some people say we overdid it during the pandemic to try and help people. There must be one more. I said I got 5, but what's the relative? You guys can come up with it because I've heard of all. Energy issues in this country, the green lobby, whatever you want to talk about, ESG. What do you think how would you rank those, Steve Leisman, in terms of one gets 20%, one gets 20? Because certainly we printed too many dollars. There's probably no doubt about that, maybe for good reason. 2, we probably spent too much.
All right.
So what do you
think? Get ready to laugh here, Jokers. Here's what I say. I say 1/3 to the supply side, 1/3 to the fiscal side, and 50% to the Fed.
Yeah, that comes up to that's good.
Basically, what happened was the Federal Reserve literally printed trillions of dollars and handed it to corporations through quantitative easing. Fiscally, Congress handed out bags of cash to rich fuckers and then forgave loans with PPP program. And then we had the most incompetent person ever placed in charge of transportation with no qualifications whatsoever. His name was Pete Buttigieg. His big qualification was finishing dead last in a run for DNC chair, finishing second in Iowa, and being a mayor of the 4th largest city in Indiana. And yet he was handed one of the most important cabinet positions in the entire country because he was good on the TV a couple times and Libs liked him. And so we have so what happened? And why do I blame Pete Buttigieg? Well, we handed $50 billion to the airlines. What did they do? They got a bunch of pilots to retire early. They had a bunch of pilots with years of flying left who they retired early. Why? Because senior pilots get paid more. They have union contracts. The longer you've been with the airline, the more you make. If you could replace a senior pilot with a junior pilot in the same plane, you could pay him hundreds of dollars an hour less. Well, not $100 an hour left, but like $50 an hour less. A hell of a lot cheaper. And so there's a bunch of pilots that still have fly time that are retired now. So they can't they can't find pilots. And it costs tens of thousands of dollars and years to become trained up to become a pilot. You can't replace them overnight. Same thing with what happened in the ports. We have we have a cartel of a few large shipping companies, and they are just charging outrageous rates. And they like the fact that there's a backlog because they can charge more. Their costs are fixed. The charges it used to cost a couple $1,000s to ship a container from China. Now it costs $15,000 per container. Their cost didn't change. They get to gouge the fuck out of everybody. So massive supply, and then you know, we also had a little bit of pent up demand from, you know, people not spending any money during COVID. But that is way overblown. Like, the COVID relief to poor people has been spent. It's gone. The child tax credit got rid of. Back to where it was before the pandemic. Enhanced unemployment deleted. And by the way, chat, inflation is high everywhere except for a couple places, China and Bolivia. So what the fuck are you talking about? Oh, the real issue is we have a short, and if you want to know, Mike, what do you blame inflation on? Well, I just blame part of it on Pete Buttigieg, incompetent. The Federal Reserve giving money to rich people who didn't need it. But what's even more important than all of that, and this is very simple and easy, this is what it is. The war in Ukraine. Sanctions on Russia, cutting off oil and gas to Europe. That has destroyed the fucking world economy. And it's about to crash big time. The only solution is end the war in Ukraine, get peace. 2, lift sanctions on Iran and Venezuela. Get their oil back in the world market to undercut the price gougers. Those are concrete steps that you can take to solve this issue. Or you can lose the election and go into a far-right party, which will probably do that. They won't lift sanctions on Iran or Venezuela, but they will get peace with Russia. And that's going to cool inflation. And they're going to be the inflation champions. And it's going to destroy the Democratic Party completely. And obviously corporate greed. You know, they're price gouging like crazy. Obviously corporate greed. Let's keep going.
You know what?
Because just real quickly, real quick, Joe, because it's the failure of the Fed in the first instance. It got the supply impact of the pandemic wrong, and it did not respond to the fiscal side. So that's why I think a 50% chunk of it, is 1/3 supply, 1/3, and of course you layer in Ukraine in there, that's important. But the Fed needed to respond to those other two elements.
You totally disagree with Steve in this case, Rick? I don't think you guys are that far off.
Yes. No. Well, we're not that far off, but I don't totally agree. I think at the very, very top is energy. Okay, you know, I was today in front of the inflation day. There's so many articles about energy. Brent briefly on Tuesday went below pre-February 24.
I agree. It's energy, man.
Ukraine-Russia invasion levels. See, here's the deal. If it wasn't for all the mistakes all these countries in Europe and around the globe have done regarding overestimating renewables and underestimating fossil fuels, it would have never put Putin in this position. In the position, we get fibbed at a little bit here because the numbers of Putin's output and Russia's output are up, despite sanctions. I don't hear that very often. And I think that it's because that's the way it needs to be. We need this energy. And it's really put the world.
It's up, but it's going to China. It's going to India. China and India are the ones that are winning. Europe is getting fucked.
In a fix. That is at top of the list. The next down, central banks. Central banks have thought they were Hercules and Xena the warrior princess all wrapped up in one, but they're not. Because at some point, you got to stop manipulating the markets and let it recalibrate. And this recalibration still has leftovers from the credit crisis. It's going to be messy. Okay, so 40%, and then you can split the net last 20% with all your other issues.
I mean, I don't like Santelli at all. I think he's a piece of shit, but I think there's a lot that's right about that. Wow. I mean, 9.1 inflation is absolutely batshit crazy. Real incomes fall further. Inflation-adjusted incomes based on average hourly earnings fell 1% for the month. We're down 3.6% from a year ago. That means people have suffered a 3.6% wage cut in a year. Jesus Christ. I mean, the interest rates are so out of whack, too. In a statement following the report, Biden said tackling inflation is my top priority. That's a lie. If it was, he would call up Venezuela and Iran and say, Iran, we'll accept you back in the nuclear deal. We'll accept you back in the nuclear deal, and we promise we won't break our treaty again. You could sell oil. You call up Venezuela and say, thank you for we want to have a constructive relationship with Venezuela. That's why we're inviting Mexico to take the lead in reducing domestic tensions. And we promise not to interfere with your domestic politics as long as you allow Mexico to oversee democratic elections in a few years. I will buy your oil now. There you go. Solution. But no, see, Venezuela, we got to steal their oil, Mike. There's a lot of billions of dollars trillions of dollars we could steal for private corporations. How dare you suggest we just buy their oil with money? Isn't the U.S. inflation rate lower than most of Europe? Because they're bearing the brunt of the Russian invasion. What the fuck are you talking about?
Inflation surged 9.1% year over year in June, pushed up in part,
the best part
by high gas prices.
And these new numbers not only mark an inflation high in the pandemic.
Most awkward part was that AMLO told Biden Mexico is letting Americans cross the border to buy gas because it's $1 cheaper per gallon. Biden, when he finally finished after 31 minutes, reminded him the U.S. economic growth is leading the world. Gas is cheaper because of the big subsidy that cost the government millions. Yes, that's called taking care of your people with your own oil, you stupid fuck. You think Mexicans shouldn't benefit from their own oil, you dummy? You worthless liberal piece of shit. Yes, if we dig oil or resources out of our own ground, we should benefit, not some foreign capital owner, you dumbass piece of human refuse. Liberals make me disgusted. Worthless. Joe Biden should run for president in 2024, but if he decides against it, Jon Stewart should run. The Libs in the replies saying that he's not qualified is the funny bit here. They actually believe these positions are occupied by competent people and not career sociopaths who are born into the right families. Incredible. Yeah, that's the biggest myth. A person is a liberal if they actually believe in the meritocracy myth. This is the funniest thing about liberals is they say they believe in meritocracy, but then how do they act in their real lives? Like meritocracy is bullshit. How do I know? What do? They move into school districts that are better for their kids. They pay money for tutoring, extracurricular activities. Their network. They get their children, Princeton Review SAT prep. They donate money for schools so they get their kid in if they have the means. They do everything they can to line up internships with people they have relationships with their kids. They do everything they can to give their kid an unfair advantage over other kids. They don't believe in meritocracy. They believe in nepotism. It's how they operate in everything they do for their own families. They know meritocracy is bullshit. They know the person that's best for the job doesn't get the job. They know it's about who you know, not what you know. So if you operate as if nepotism rules the day, but then you say our system is fair, you're fucking batshit crazy. There's no such thing as merit in America. And Donald Trump was president. Donald Trump was president. That should annihilate. George W. Bush was president. The last two Republicans were silver spoon babies, dipshit fail sons. You have to be batshit crazy to think this country runs on merit. God.
It's the highest inflation we've seen since 1981. It is also higher than experts had been forecasting as recently as just yesterday. Our Matt Egan is with us. This is bad. There's bad. It's worse than the White House thought, and there's no way. I mean, every American is suffering so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Poppy, we were bracing for a bad number, but this is way worse than we even anticipated. I mean, we haven't seen 9% inflation since the 1980s. And this means that, the cost of living is going up, right? Paychecks are not going as far because prices keep going higher. And this is happening across the board, right? Gasoline prices, obviously 60% more expensive to fill up your car than a year ago, according to this inflation report. Yeah. Food prices up by 10% the most since 1981. Shelter, rent, home prices have gone up. And, this is not just a problem for Main Street, right? This is not sitting well with Wall Street. We saw the moment these numbers came out, Dow futures went down. The Dow is on track to open down by more than 300 points. NASDAQ futures down by 2%. Investors are worried that the Federal Reserve is going to have to go big
Investors
again
are worried.
by raising interest rate hikes, not just at the meeting in late July, but also perhaps another really big rate hike in September. And the problem, of course, is that the more the Fed does, the greater the risk that they overdo it and cause a recession.
Yeah.
So, Matt, we've been hearing from administration officials for some time that at some point this is going to peak. You know, it's just around the bend. And we have, to be fair, we had the numbers up there, seen gas prices come down for the last month fairly significantly. Do the numbers show, do the economists you speak to look at this as a peak moment, or do they just not know?
They don't really know. I think that's the honest answer. I mean, we've had so many false starts here where we expected inflation was going to peak and then it didn't, in part because of the war in Ukraine. But the good news is that gasoline prices have come down, and that is not captured in today's report, right? The national average is now $4.63 a gallon for regular gas. That's not cheap, but as you can see, it is down significantly, off by more than 30 cents over the past month. So that's going to help. And again, that is not captured in today's report. So who knows? Maybe we're going to look back and say the June 2022 inflation report was the worst of this inflation crisis. I don't know, but certainly we hope that for families, the cost of living starts to go down because it's just way too high right now.
What a disaster, dude. What a fucking disaster, dude. Are you watching the stream unsubbed? You're making income inequality worse. You are doing anti-praxis. We are the only Twitch stream that will not accept scam advertisers, and I will never fuck you over by selling you crap